Welcome to episode 200 of Wealth Talk. My name is Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hello, Kevin.
You nearly forgot me then, and we've done 99 so far.
I'm so excited, my tongue twisted. 200 episodes,
biggie,
Kevin.
Chris. This is a biggie. Just cast your mind back.
Yeah. It was February 2019 when we kicked off. I remember we were sat around the table in the boardroom and wow. What has happened since then? We've had pandemics, we've had different governments, we've had all sorts going on.
Well, we had a wonderful exposure to the complexity of business, complexity of politics, complexity of life in general, and what it's thrown at us. And I'll never forget, what was it, 4 chancellors, 3 prime ministers, and 2 monarchs in a single year. And that was just last year. Yeah. It's been a crazy roller coaster, but the mission has not really deviated from when so much of life is uncertain. The object of being financially independent creates certainty where uncertainty normally prevails. And we've seen so much of that since 2019, Chris. And I'm not deviating at all from the broad mission. And I think WealthBuilders are absolutely now known, aren't we, for being a consumer champion, doing what's right for people, always focusing on education and support and connections and due diligence and not product sales. But it's time for a change. It's time to punch significantly above our weight and put ourselves behind a massive campaign. But more of that later, because you're going to tell people about some events that are coming up, because now we're kind of well and truly out of all the, I suppose, the restrictions of COVID and work-life changes and getting back into doing things. We do want to get out there, and hopefully when people hear about our new mission, we'll get a whole army of acolytes trying to line up behind us and help us fulfill that new mission. So what are we going to do just to get out there, Chris?
Absolutely. Yes, I have got news of our next event, and it will be in London. So the date will be Thursday, the 17th of August. And it's a networking, it's an informal get together for both members and non-members to come along and have an enjoyable evening, have a drink together, and just have a good old chinwag and catch up. So Thursday, 17th of August, and the location is Homegrown Club in Marylebone, so in London, and you can find out the full details and register your ticket at wealthbuilders.co.uk/events. So Wealth Builder members, SSAS and Academy members will come for free. And if you're not a member, then you can just grab a ticket, although spaces are limited. So head there soon and make sure you can come along and say hello.
And we will make sure that there's lubrication. We have to clink a glass with somebody, otherwise I'm not coming. So, we got to do that. That's going to be great to get back out. And of course, let's not lose sight that we want to visit all corners of the UK, north, south, east, and west. But we'll start off with London, and then we'll start working our way around the country. Particularly, I think, and I'm hoping, Chris, that the kind of new, more focused, more passionate outcome will be well received. In fact, every time I've mentioned it, whether I'm in a room, on a Zoom, or just recently in a field doing a presentation to a bunch of people at a festival, not
Glastonbury, where I've just returned from.
No, nothing as big as that, but just as much fun, I'm sure. And I just say, hey, I've got a new mission that I'm focused on, and I'm thinking about doing, what do you think? And I get whoops and definitely back that, definitely behind that. And I've never seen that with anything else. All the other things we do, all the other, I suppose, challenges we make to society for bad pricing on pensions being too expensive, don't get a whoop on that in a room. Being financially independent, I get polite applause, but you don't get a whoop. But talking about this, you get a whoop. And that, filled me with vim and vigor and renewed enthusiasm to want to put my life's work into doing this thing, Chris. And that's what I want to do.
Excellent.
So until next time. Oh no, you want to know what it is?
So it leaves on the cliffhanger there. Well, I'll just say, again, reinforcing, our mission, Kevin, which is to help business owners and ambitious employees to move from financial insecurity to financial independence. And that's normally within 5 years. And we've long had a mission, yourself, Kevin, to fill St. James's Park, 50,000 ambitious employees and business owners. But there's a slight shift now on our focus.
Yeah, and the shift is this. The shift is wealth building is no longer focused in our mind on the individuals who are doing the work, the employees and the business owners, but to really focus on the success of an entire family. So I've obviously mentioned this before, but Wealth Builders for Families is aimed to bring the knowledge and education that is so sorely missed and not taught on any of the transitions that our young ones go through. And look back, you took a quick look back, 2019, but if we look back 100 years, there's never really been any financial education, ever, in any transition. So nobody was ever taught in school. Nobody was ever taught it in higher education, college or university. No one's even taught it at work. And they're not taught it by anybody other than those, more often than not, Chris, sadly, with a self-interest, and that's a conflict of interest for me. So I want to change that and bring financial literacy into the home, not into the school, not into the institution, but into the home. And I believe home is where we spend all of our time as parents. And when I was wrestling with the challenge of, is this something we should go and talk to schools and headmasters and add to curriculums? And yes, some private schools have been talking to me about doing that. But by and large, what I want to say is the problem has not ever been different in terms of it's never been taught. So why now? Well, I think there's a combination of reasons of why now. One is I mentioned just recently, didn't I, that as a granddad for the second time, just a few weeks ago, and I was reading an article that says children born today can fully expect to live to 100. And in a life where our youngsters are joining the workforce later, are buying properties later, carrying more student debt than ever before, and we're hearing tuition fees are on the rise again, the challenge is even harder for our young ones to get not just a head start, but just to even get to an even keel, let alone make progress. So I think the responsibility falls on us now as the parents and the pioneers, those people who are starting their wealth journey, and say, well, let's embrace that journey for ourselves, but bring our children along as part of the journey. So I'm not saying they definitely do not want to have kids of any age sitting in front of a screen. It's not about that. It's about bringing a new mindset, new best practices, new case studies, new ways to occupy and engage children, whether they're 6, whether they're 16, or whether they're 26. And as I thought about the breadth of that challenge, creating content for the parents and the grandparents and those who take responsibility, aunts and uncles and so on, then it became more apparent to me that we've got to do a huge amount of work to build the content to suit all kids going through their school transitions. And then as the young adults go through from university into work transitions. So it's almost spanning 20 years. Now, of course, we're parents for longer than that, but that's a mammoth task to take on board, Chris. And I'm determined to do that so we can get what's the best way to help 5-year-olds absorb the mindset and the belief systems that a family's created? What are the best ways to get the 11-year-olds to discover themselves and discover what they're good at and to be interested in while they've still got that creativity, to discover what a challenging 15-year-old might want to do to, be challenging of their parents, but at the same time, still learning some valuable things. And much of this will be just showing people different things that they can do where the children will absorb things. We know that the formative years of children are always in the early years, and they are sponge-like. I mean, in the end, they're computers with a blank instruction manual, aren't they? And then they absorb everything. So we want to make sure we're giving the right signals, of abundance, not scarcity, of value systems, not the value of the cost of things, about generosity, about sharing, and about making some contribution and caring for the planet or something else other than themselves. And in the end, we want to go all the way to the end with their parents and teach them how to create a family charter, how to create family wealth that lives into the next generations, and then the next generation, and then the next generation, so that the very children we're bringing through now become the baton holders for the next generation, and they accept responsibility. And so it's the concept of not what you leave your children, but what you leave within them that counts. And I'm determined that's going to be my life's mission from here on in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, we're all behind that. I'm not a parent myself, not at the moment. However, I've spoken to hundreds of our members, Kevin, and when creating their wealth maps at the beginning of their own wealth journey, and I ask them, what's driving you? What's your reason why? Almost always it's legacy. It's to pass it on. So I understand the importance of this, whilst I might not be able to relate in all senses. Obviously, I was a child myself one day, and I understand the importance of this. And as you say, Kevin, every single time we've talked about this on the podcast, we've just had rafts and rafts of inquiries of people saying, how can I get involved? So let me just share one URL now for anyone listening who just wants to be kept up to date, just wants to kind of be part of this early movement that we're working on right now. So head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/families, and you can just put your name and email address in there, and that will make sure that you're on the list, and you'll be the first to know as and when we start rolling out our beta version, Kevin, which will be coming really, really soon.
Yeah, it needs to come soon. I'm determined. I'm determined, like I was back when we launched WealthBuilders, and I think you have a debt of gratitude from me there, because as a creator of things, creator of content and creator of ideas, and a great thinker, I believe, sometimes I don't get everything down on a piece of paper. I don't turn it into a program or a course of action that someone follow. You did a great job. And I remember when we created the WealthBuilders Academy, which wasn't called it then, but nonetheless, the WealthBuilders kind of educational process and system, we decided we'd create founder members. And the principle behind the thinking was, if we tell people the truth, that we've got a mission to help people become financially independent, we've already got some great content that we believe is our own content, our own intellectual property. But we know we need other people to contribute to that, because we're not the gurus, we're just guides. And a guide needs to tap into the wisdom of others. And we didn't have all of that laid out. We didn't have all the guides because we had to find others in addition to ourselves. And so we made a promise that we weren't perfect, but we were committed. And people signed up. And it did cost them less, significantly less than now. But I'd like to do that again. So I'd like to create the idea of founder families. So as a family steward, as a family member, as a parent, or as a would-be parent, or even someone who wants to help other members of their own family or even other families. But I think parents will gravitate to this because they'll know deep down they never got the lessons. And probably deep down, they probably didn't get great lessons from their own parents. I know I didn't. I don't know about you, but that's maybe something we can catch up on. But most people didn't get great lessons. They just absorbed what they absorbed and didn't always get the best from that. But to do this justice, we got to think this through, but we want to get started. Rather than get perfect, get started. So I want to invite a number of families to become the founders, where they can help us, not just, I don't mean help us with the content, but help us, I guess, shape what's missing. because we'll see gaps. They'll have a child of a certain age, and how do we influence that? Now, this is not a school for parenting. It's not going to make parents better parents. It's about the financial side of things, not to make children money obsessed. Absolutely not. In fact, the opposite of that. I mentioned generosity and the spirit of contribution. All will be embedded in that. So it's not about the love of money. It's just about being aware that every time money weaves itself into the very fabric of our lives, and we can't deny that. So we've got to be aware of that. The difference between notes and coins and circulations we've had historically now to the tap, tap, tap. You see with your phone or your card. We're seeing social media and that comparison. We're seeing so many different ways that our children are being influenced, not always for the good. And I don't think it's right to leave the financial education of our younger ones to Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or AI or the banks or the financial institutions. I think it's better we take that responsibility for ourselves. And that's why teachers can't teach it. I don't have anything against teachers. They do a sterling job. And of course, it's difficult because if you're not taught yourself how to teach the subject, you can't teach it. So part of the challenge, and I think it's an interesting one, Chris, is the parents have got to learn more about the financial side of life more so they can be better teachers. And I don't mean teaching formally, as I've said, but teaching by absorption, teaching by experiences and games and lots of things. And I think a large part of this, Chris, will come down to what's said and done around a dinner table. I believe passionately that we're feeding our kids anyway. And I love the family time that I spent with my children as growing up, and that was regular. Certainly, there was at least one day a week when everybody sat around the same table. In our house, that was normally at the weekend on a Sunday. But it's not true of every family, and every family is different. But there's times when you can get people around a dinner table or a breakfast table or a barbecue or whatever it would be, and lessons can be shared, whether the child is 6, as I said, 16 or 26. And I think it's important that we start to build that thought and use the table as a place where conversations take place. Also a connection, by the way, to grandparents, so I was thinking about, as I'm a granddad, thinking about my granddad, I've got no memories, no photographs really, no recordings, nothing to tell me about who he was. And I think I regret that. I didn't ask those questions. But now with technology, you could have grandkids asking their granddad, how did you meet grandma? What did you do for your first job? What was it like when you had to do, and get people connected intergenerationally. So these are the sorts of things that I have in my mind. I'm sure you'll ask some questions about, well, do people really want that, or is it just the ramblings of an old man?
Well, I certainly think you've covered a lot of the key things that we know are important to parents because of the conversations we've been having over the last few months, Kevin. And I know this also stems into something else that you feel strongly about, which is that creation of a family charter. And, what exactly do you envisage with the charter?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier on, with the life that's going to be lived longer, there's more responsibility on funding that life. And it's going to be more difficult. I mean, for lots of economic reasons that I won't go into any depth, but for the first time, for example, the older generation is more populous than the younger generation. What I mean by that is there are less taxpayers to pay for the pensions of the older people. And when you get into that position, the governments of the day, no matter whatever their political persuasion, can no longer pay the bills when it comes to the future pension of the next generation. So that pension is going to be pushed back and back and back. So the reliance on companies can't be done either because they can't deal with the macroeconomic changes. We're going to live longer. So they can't put more money in because if they had to put more money in, they run the risk of the businesses going bust. So I think increasingly the responsibility and the risk is going to fall on the children themselves, the younger ones themselves, and if they're really equipped to handle it, they don't understand. They could be very easily tempted into the short-term gap fill of debt. And I'm very fearful of that, because debt is an easy way to live a life, but paying the consequences later. So the idea of the charter is to start to create and instill a set of values. You remember we created the WealthBuilders Declaration of Independence, and we created a set of 7 values, and I believe families can set their own values. They don't have to be the 7 values, but they'll have something like, you know, Whelan's always do their best and try their hardest. They always play full out for the team that they're playing in. They always do what's right. They always live by the maxim of do unto others what you can see there are some rules of engagement you can instill into a family and build that into life's practices, not about money, but just about who you are and what your ethics are and what your integrity is. And then when you move into finance, you can start to create your own assets. And then when you create your own assets, and by definition, if you can create assets that outlive you, you're going to leave a great legacy. But if you can then help the younger generation understand how you've created that, what lessons you learned, and that they can pick up those lessons and expand on those lessons and even add more value to what you did, they can pick up that baton and not just be entitled kids with a legacy you leave them and pays out, but like, you know, the Rockefellers and famous families like that, they create a set of funds and principles that are there, like a trust fund really, that provides an income stream, an opportunity. And then the children of that next generation can tap into that, but they feel an obligation to pay back to the next generation. So the whole idea of a family charter is a set of principles and rules and guidance that get absorbed and then expanded and changed by future generations, but based on the fundamental principles you set out in the document. And I'd like to help families create that document. And we do a little bit of that in the WealthBuilders Academy with the Family Wealth Builder name and involving the kids and the logo and the emblem and all those sorts of things. And that's fun and it's fascinating, but it's not really embedded in what we teach after that. It's just an idea to begin almost with the end in mind. And I want to sharpen up what that image is of the end in mind, which is you creating a family charter for the next generation to follow, but you leave them enough wisdom to expand that and to build that for the generation after them. So I told a joke a long, long time ago, I can't remember when I did it, which is, I imagine, you know, just as like they had the old portraits of the elderly landowners, the landed gentry of days gone by, you know, perched on top of a horse with a sort of, you know, soldierly like grin or some kind of, you know, feeling quite important. Just imagine just a picture of Kev and somebody somewhere 150 years from now going, cheers, mate.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really nice thought. And you kind of filled in the blanks there. As you say, we do ask our members to create that logo, that family wealth business name. But this is really filling in the steps and getting every part of the family involved into that process as well. So a lot of the elements that we're already teaching, Kevin, within the academy, they will obviously flow into the program here in terms of some of the education as well. But I think it's really going to be around the community aspect, the support of parents and sharing, which is really going to make this come to life.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the timing is right also because of the fact we can go out and meet people now. And I think people will do more for their kids than anything else. And I think we'll learn what some of the great parents in our community already somewhat more enlightened, I suppose, than most, because they're already taking some steps, but they'll be able to share what they're doing. And we already have people who chomping at the bit to share what they're doing, not just it's not just what they're giving and what they're doing financially, but what opportunities they're sharing, what experiences they're giving their children to participate, even seeing some entrepreneurial kids. And I believe that's an important distinction as well to make, Chris, that all too often the historical lockstep was everybody went to school, everybody went to work, everybody retired. You know, there's this this everybody marching to the beat of a single drum. I think that's changing, and the way that it will change, not only because we're living longer, and therefore we all have to create an individualized plan to live to 100. It's not just that, but I think entrepreneurialism should be front and center as an opportunity, as a career. I mean, why does everybody have to go into this idea of, most people are going to university not because they have fallen in love with the subject, but more often than not because it's an academic escalator to the next level. You know, you get a better job if you get a better degree and so on. And I just think there's room, and I'd like to be promoting and sponsoring and showcasing young entrepreneurs, and maybe making some of the value that we give, and I'll mention another point at the moment as well, the value that we make, give that back to help young entrepreneurs become successful and do good work. And on that subject, and I don't know how to do it yet, but I think this should also work. That I think as part of the Families program, we should be giving the opportunity for parents who perhaps wouldn't afford to invest in this sort of a program. There will be a cost to it, but we're deliberately going to keep it accessible. But even so, as accessible as it would be, there'll be some parents who simply can't afford to do that. And I'd like to be giving gifts of membership to people, and find a way to do that allows parents who just really want to do that, but they can't afford to get involved in the process. So I'd like to do that as well. So combination of supporting young entrepreneurs, those people who perhaps want to do what's right for their kids, but for whatever reason, you know, any cost is inaccessible to them right now. So those are the sorts of ingredients, Chris. I'm hoping, and apologies for filling up along the way, but it touches me, this stuff.
Yeah. So we'd love for you to join us on this mission. And the easiest way is just to quickly take a minute, head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/families. Just put your name, email address, hit the submit button, and we will get in touch with you over the coming weeks to let you know when we're closer to launching our beta group. And we've done some focus groups in the past, Kevin. We'll definitely be doing those again. So we'll invite people to share their experiences, their ideas, and we'll do some of those online, and we'll do some of those hopefully face-to-face as well. So make sure you've given us your details so that we can include you in that.
And absolutely, if you've already got some case studies of entrepreneurial kids and you're doing some great things like sharing what you're doing as you're building your own wealth. We know a lot of our property owner clients do that, and their kids are walking around and understanding where the value is being created, and the experience of that is fantastic. That's not ever going to be taught in any kind of a school. It's a school of its own creation in many respects. And I think that's just fantastic. So if you're already doing that, you'll let us know. Reach out to hello@wealthbuilders.co.uk and tell us about that, because you could be one of the first people showcased in what we do. And just as we have the podcast, and I think probably, Chris, we might need to change the podcast a little. We normally have a weekly podcast, and I expect that will continue. But instead of just we share lessons, don't we? But I think it would be important not just to showcase individual members building their wealth, and we've done that regularly now, but also families doing great things with their kids of all ages. So it doesn't have to be the teeny tinies. You know, we're going to create in our journey what we call the smart family, so that we can actually give lessons and create the content and think constantly about people of a certain age. And it was funny because I had one of my clients who is kind of mature guy, very successful guy, said, can I be, like the rich dad? Can I be like the rich uncle and come along and give some lessons every now and again? I said, sure. If you've got content and that, is appropriate, and he's got content he wants to create for the kids at the sort of early adult stage from their 20s up to 25, 26. I said, yeah, sure. Let's check out the content. We can co-create the content, and you can be, the rich Uncle Michael or the rich Uncle George or whatever it would be, and come in and talk just like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So even people wanting to add content. So again, if you've got something you want to say, reach out to us. If you want to follow the program, wealthbuilders.co.uk/families if you want to contribute in some way. And I think lots and lots of groups will want to do that and want to get the message out there, and empower parents to become better role models for their kids of all ages. I hope we did that justice.
Yeah, it's extremely exciting, Kevin. Thanks for sharing that. And don't forget, come and, continue the conversation with us face to face. If you're in London on 17th of August in the evening, then head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/events to grab your ticket and come along, and we'll start talking through some of these ideas that we've been mentioning today. Yeah.
Good. I better get to work then.
All right then. Yes. So that wraps up 200th episode. Wow. Okay. So we're on our march to 300 now, Kev.
Well, I'll keep going as long as I can.
Yeah. Wow. Who's to think what might happen in that space of time? Anyway, we'll leave you with those thoughts, and Kevin will be back same time, same place next week.
Yes. And until 201, sir. I'll see you.